Secondly, Jamie's going to give the opportunity for the audience yourselves to ask questions at the end. So, Jamie, take it away whenever you're ready.
I think I'm just trying to work out if I'm recording. Does it look like I am?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. So yeah, I'm just looking at the names on it, and I think I pretty much know everyone, which is brilliant. Let me just jump. So or can people just jump on mute for me? I think there's just a bit of. Oh, I might be able to do it for you. I think so. Cool. So I'm here kind of representing Inclusive Cultures, which is my business, my own organization, which is all about driving equality, diversity, inclusion within the sports sector. So we're an independent expert consultancy based on 10 years of my experience working in equality, diversity, inclusion within sport. I started my career in sport back with Hockey Wales way back in the day. So it's nice to see Hannah on the call. I then went on and worked at Swim England for 4 years, where I led on equality, diversity across all of participation, and then I moved up to work at Sport England for 2.5 years as part of their equality and diversity team. I then took the decision at the start of this year to move away from that space and launch my own work, purely because I felt like there's a lot to be done in this space at the moment, and I wanted to go directly and get a bit more hands-on and potentially move away from the politics a little bit more, which we might kind of talk about. So yeah, that's the organisation, and just a very quick overview about me. I think, as Gurmej said, I know a lot of the people on this call, but I started playing hockey when I started high school. When I moved to mid Wales, actually, I found a hockey club in my local village, and that became my life. So I got involved with kind of coaching and umpiring and volunteering at a young age. Some experience like as a committee member, and then very quickly with the support of Hockey Wales managed to get involved with lots of stuff in Europe with the European Federation. I was involved in setting up the European Youth Panel, which I then chaired for almost 10 years. That's now in an amazing place with hundreds of young people across Europe, all connected, and they come together every 2 years at the European Champs. I've done a lot of umpiring, so I umpired men's and a little bit women's national league, and I umpired internationally for Wales. And as you can see from the picture, I was exceptionally lucky to go to the Gold Coast in 2018. Just like a genuine once in a lifetime experience, was amazing. So I've coached a little bit through the English single system. And I did a little bit whilst through my time at Loughborough Uni, and I've done lots of stuff around kind of equality, diversity, representation in the sport. I've linked with a few different brands, so I'm an ambassador at the moment for Dragon Hockey, and as part of that, we're doing lots of stuff. But I helped them to develop the first ever Pride stick, which some people may have seen, may even had, and kind of supporting where things are going with that. So then, for lots of different reasons, I'm involved in this space, and was super pleased to get involved with the all-in hockey stuff, and really pleased to be able to come along and deliver a session which hopefully people will find really useful. So just kind of setting a bit of context for the discussion tonight, I really want people to feel like this is a safe space. Nothing that we're going to talk about tonight is meant to be accusational or inflammatory or aimed at any one particular individual. This is a collective movement around this space, and us trying to together make a difference. So I don't want people to be concerned about language or holding back. I don't want people to leave the session thinking, oh, I wish I asked that. And that goes to anyone kind of watching this back. And there'll be ways that you can follow up and get in touch, and please do. I guess I just wanted to take a second to say well done for coming. This is a really important thing for all of us, and Hockey All In is in this space now where we're starting to push out what we're about, and now trying to offer some kind of support for people wanting to make progress in this space. So it's brilliant to see some people here on a sunny Friday night. and hopefully, yeah, there'll be some others watching it back. So this is a great opportunity for us all to be part of the movement and trying to make progress around equality, diversity, inclusion across the sport that we all love. And success in that space only genuinely works if everyone is committed to the cause. We all need to be on that journey together to make a difference in this space. This is about creating a more inclusive space for everyone to take part, and most importantly, to ensure that they have a great time when they do so, no matter how they're taking part in the sport. And as we're probably all aware, there has never been a more important time to be doing this work. It's so important right now. So as a quick reminder, this is what we've mentioned previously about what Hockey All In is about. So this is a movement for anybody who is wanting to make progress around getting greater diversity and inclusion within the sport. We want to see people committing to make a difference, because if you're not doing anything, you're part of the problem. That's kind of the space that we're moving into now. We're moving beyond thinking, oh, that might be a good idea, maybe I should do something. Now is the time for action, for actually doing some stuff. Again, as a reminder, what we're trying to achieve as a movement is based around these 3 A's. So acknowledge, assess, and act. So this webinar is the first in a series across these 3 A's about trying to offer some support around these 3 bits. So obviously the first one, this one, is focused on acknowledgement. So what we're going to talk about is acknowledging your own privilege and your own kind of experiences in life and some of the opportunities that you may have had above and beyond what other people might have. And as part of that, moving on to acknowledge other people's experiences. And then finally, acknowledging your power individually, collectively, to make a difference in this space. So that's what we're going to talk about. Just as a very quick overview, I wanted to kind of set the scene in terms of where I'm at around what equality, diversity, inclusion means. What I should say is we've got the chat open this time, so if people want to jump in with stuff, ask questions throughout, I can keep an eye on it. If you disagree, you want to back something up, just jump in and share some thoughts. So for me, equality is all about what I think we should be focused on, is equality of opportunity. So if we always keep that in mind, really kind of check and challenge ourselves around if everybody genuinely has an equal opportunity to access something or whatever, that's the kind of thing I'd want us to be thinking about around equality. Diversity is then about recognizing people's individual difference and potentially even going a bit further to celebrate some of that. So really making the point that you understand that people are different, people are diverse, and that is something that should 100% be exposed, celebrated. And then inclusion is moving towards this space where everybody has the opportunity to be included and feel like they are able to be their genuine self and have a great time when they do so. So across that space, we're looking at making sure everybody has the same opportunity to get involved, which may mean different levels of support for different people, celebrating the fact that you are trying to bring different diverse people into those spaces, and then ensuring that once people are there, they feel included, supported, and are able to have a really good time. It's quite easy in this space to get really into like kind of the legal, scary, kind of big word space. But what I really try and do is bring this stuff down to a real practical level about really being focused on the experiences that people are having on a Tuesday night when they go to training, when they're playing games on a Saturday, that kind of stuff. So you can see within this word diagram some of the things that will be will come under like the protected characteristics. So people may be aware there are protected characteristics within equality law that protect people from being discriminated against and kind of being abused. But as much as there's those 9 characteristics, which some obvious ones would be things like gender, disability, race, age, pregnancy, that kind of stuff, there's also other really important things on here around social class, around education, around lots of different stuff, which then starts to move into this kind of access to opportunity space. So yeah, I guess I wanted to make the point that we can very quickly get into a kind of legal discussion around some of this stuff, but I think it's really important to bear in mind mostly about, this is really about the practical side of what people are experiencing day to day. So these are some of the things I just kind of wanted to highlight to maybe bring that to life a bit more. So this is all stuff that we may be familiar with that's happened over the last year or so, and why there has never been a more important time to tackle some of this stuff. We're obviously all familiar with coronavirus, and we may be familiar with some things associated that with the differing levels of take-up of the vaccine with different communities, with how different communities have been hit harder by death rates or kind of long-term exposure, or how certain communities would have been hit harder by the furlough scheme or being made redundant because of the type of work that they are in. That's the kind of stuff that is really having a day-to-day impact in this space. We will all be familiar with the George Floyd murder and the movement around Black Lives Matter that has emerged from that, and is still such an important thing and will continue to be. But how that one incident, that what was it, 9 minutes and 20 seconds or something, has sparked this global movement around properly calling out institutionalized racism and really trying to tackle that on a big scale, has been amazing to see, and is such an important part of every sector, but has been a big part of the discussion within sport, and there's a lot more to come in that space. But again, that is something that was so big that people were forced to recognize and talk about it. We had Kerry Williams on a session on here on the last session, and she was really explicit about kind of how she was affected by that. And Kate talked about how she took that moment to go back to speak to Kerry about her previous experiences, and that was such an important thing for her to do, to recognize that there may have been things that happened that she may not have recognized at the time, and we'll come to talk about that a little bit more. There's other things in here around the movement around transgender equality and the clash that is having around women's rights at the moment, and how a lot of people think that the progression of one group of people's rights may start to impact on another people's set of rights, and that is definitely not how equality works. This is about genuine equality for everybody. But that again is a really big moment. And actually this week, as it's been announced, that Tokyo may see the first transgender athlete competing, which is going to be a massive historical moment for the games itself, and then also to see kind of what's going to happen from there on. But that will certainly spark some wider discussion within sport. And then the other thing I wanted to pull out was the Sarah Everard murder in Clapham more recently, which again sparked a big discussion about women's safety and women being abused, assaulted sexually to the point of being murdered, and how that again, that one moment sparked lots of discussion around how to try and make women feel safer when they are walking down the street, when they are participating in sport, when there may be kind of traveling to away games or whatever. There's ways that we can make this stuff really relevant to what we're all doing. So this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing every day in the news and on social media and in the papers that have a real impact in terms of what we're all trying to do and deliver. And it's really important for us to take the time to think, when you're reading stuff about this or you're seeing stuff online, how does this really impact what I'm doing, what we're doing as a club? Is there stuff that we can do to make this better for people? It's important that we take that time, and again, we'll come on to that. So as I've kind of moved towards talking about this, is why does this stuff matter to clubs? Why should we be paying attention to this? Why is it important? It's important because everybody should have the ability to participate. And that may seem like a bit of a blanket statement to say, but they clearly don't right now. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in this position. So it's really important that we all strive towards ensuring that genuinely everybody has the ability to take part in what we're trying to do. And if we can do so even more, make sure they have a great time when they get there. This is about finding new members, finding new volunteers, finding new talent, finding new support, finding new things, new people, new opportunities from areas that you just may not have looked in before, which may even be on your doorstep. But it just sometimes doesn't happen that way. This is about ensuring that your club is genuinely representative of the local community surrounding your area, your community, where you participate. This is about ensuring that your committees are making inclusive, educated, informed decisions that will include everybody. So a lot of that comes from trying to make sure that you've got the right amount of diversity around the table. And that may mean going out to find people who can help come on board, because you may be in the position where you don't have much diversity in the club to ask people to maybe get involved with helping. So you might need to do a little bit of work to try and find some people locally who might be interested in trying to help make the club more diverse. This is about ultimately addressing what you think as a club your responsibility is to your local community. What is it that you're trying to do as a club? Are you about grassroots development? Are you about supporting young people to develop careers or experiences? Are you about producing performance athletes? All of those things are needed. All of those things are important, but they need to be accessible to everybody in the area where you are. This is how we're going to get over this stuff. And you may need to have some big discussions about what you think your responsibility is. What are you trying to achieve as a club? But now is definitely the right time to be doing that, because of all the reasons that I just mentioned, especially now that we're all returning to play after COVID. This is the time to really look to address some of this stuff. This is about putting in a little bit of effort to get some really big gains in this space, and ultimately about doing the right thing. But most of all, this is about securing the legacy and sustainability of this sport, which we all love. This is what we do. It's our lives. This is why there are people here on a Friday night listening to this stuff. And that's something that is not anybody's one responsibility. I think governing bodies in this area have a really important role for sure, but it's really difficult for a governing body of sport to have a direct influence over what is happening out on the ground every day. That is the responsibility of people who are in control of delivering those experiences. And that's why this needs to be a real collective movement. So I mentioned at the start, we're going to talk a bit about privilege. I'm just going to talk while this hopefully loads. We're going to talk a lot about white privilege, and I don't want people to feel uncomfortable around that, because this is a really important part of where the Black Lives Matter movement is going, and some of the wider points that it is making about trying to encourage privileged people to understand the experiences that they've had, as well as the experiences of others and how that may be different. So I just want to play this video from John Meji. So he was an NBA player who was the first player to come out as gay, but has done a lot of visual, a lot of work recently across kind of visual platforms around talking about privilege around this. So I'm just going to play this, and then we can talk a little bit more afterwards.
Global conversation about race and racism. You've probably had discussions at home, at school, or at work, and in those conversations, you probably heard the term white privilege. You may have even had this term used in a way that felt like an insult or an accusation. Others will have told you that it's all just made up to make white people feel bad, and none of this is right. Privilege is a hard concept for people to understand, because normally when we talk of privilege, we imagine immediate, unearned riches and tangible benefits for anyone who has it. But white privilege, and indeed all privilege, is actually more about the absence of inconvenience, the absence of an impediment or challenge, and as such, when you have it, you really don't notice it. But when it's absent, it affects everything you do. There are lots of types of privilege out there. The privilege of being born into a wealthy family versus a poor family is kind of obvious, but then there's the privilege of being able-bodied versus having or acquiring a disability that most of us take for granted. I have two very close friends who are wheelchair users, and I'll be honest, when I first met them, I was completely ignorant about the everyday ways their lives are made harder through no fault of their own. Some of these ways are simply thoughtless, but some of them are just the way we live, just the way we build infrastructure, just the way everything works. That just makes their life harder than mine. That's just one of the ways that I'm privileged. And understanding that, embracing that, doesn't make me a bad person. But ignoring it raises the chance that my friends will be excluded in ways that are not obvious to me. And as their friend, I can't allow that. There's a good chance, as a white person watching this, your life is already hard. Every day you have to overcome some difficulty or challenge just to get by, but you can still have white privilege. White privilege doesn't mean you haven't worked hard or you don't deserve the success you've had. It doesn't mean that your life isn't hard or that you've never suffered. It simply means that your skin color has not. There is nothing but a benefit to understanding our own privileges, white and otherwise. It brings us closer to those who are different. It helps us be vigilant about the ways we treat others different than us. It helps us make a society that is fairer and more equal. Having white privilege doesn't make your life easy, but understanding it can help you realize why some people's lives are harder than they should.
So yeah, we can just kind of expand on some of those points, but I hope there's stuff in there that that people can relate to. So privilege is something that is, I think, still quite a new term and kind of a concept for people to be getting their heads around. This is really getting to the nitty-gritty of challenging the white powerful majority to think about how they got to that point and how that has an impact on other people. So this is something that we really wanted to focus on as a group as part of this session, because it's so important to where we're going moving forwards. So this is all about understanding the privileged experiences that you may have had in life. So I mean, John touched on some stuff in that video, but there's loads of stuff that you can pick on around private education, which is a big part of what we're talking about in this space as well, within the sport. Things like going to university, being able to travel, things like not having to be receiving free school meals, parents who could give you all the kit you need and afford to take you to every away game or send you to every camp that you possibly could have been on. But then you can move on to other kind of like bigger stuff, like when you've not felt like being the only you in the room or the only you in a space or at a training session or at a training camp. This point about acceptance without question, in that you've never had to justify your position in a space to a bank manager, to a landlord, to anybody. Just kind of being able to get through life the way that you want to go without much challenge, on top of the kind of everyday stuff that John talked about in that video. This is about taking time to recognize the opportunities that you've had access to, which may be above and beyond what others have had the opportunity to do. This next point is a really important one for us to try and get across, in that, and again, John touched on that in that video, that this is not about feeling guilty about those experiences that you've had. What we are not trying to do with recognizing privilege is target people to say, you should feel guilty, you should feel bad, you should make up for the fact that you've had all these experiences. It's absolutely not about that. You were born into that space as much as other people were born into different spaces. This is about how you recognize that, accept the opportunities that you have had access to, and support others moving forwards to gain access to the experiences that you had. Being able to acknowledge your privilege means that you're able to accept that you may have had a different experience in life to others, which is massively important, because it means that you're on that journey to recognize that you may need to do something to help others who may be less privileged than you. And there's loads that we can do about that. These are a big context, but we can bring this down to an everyday club experience level very, very quickly and easily. So once you're able to recognize your own privilege, you're then able to move into that space of appreciating that others will have had different experiences, and you can start to understand that a bit more. So you may notice or understand where people may not have had some of those experiences that we've kind of talked about, and you may start to recognize those that might need a bit of extra support. You might even go further to offer those people support without them even needing to ask for it. That's a brilliant space to be in. This is about making a really conscious effort to recognize when something you might think is easy or standard practice or the way that we've always done it, or things are just done this way. Trying to make an effort to think about how it might not be standard for some people. It may not be simple, it may not be easy. And think about the ways that you might need to make some changes to make that fairer, more equal, more inclusive, easier to access, all of that stuff. This is about ensuring that you check and challenge the decisions that you make within the club to ensure that nobody is potentially at risk of being negatively affected by that. And that takes a bit of effort. It takes time to try and ensure that you've got representation around the table to ensure that you're making informed, educated decisions about the things that you want to do and how they may or may not affect some people in different ways. And it's about having really honest, proper conversations if there are potentially going to be some challenge. Let's put it out there, let's talk about it, let's try and overcome it together. So make sure that you've got a range of people and experiences as part of your decision-making body as a club, and ensure that you've got the right representation around the table, which importantly may not be made up of the people who are in your club right now. You may need to look outside of that in order to make a difference. Hannah, I'll come back to your question. I can see that's coming in the chat, and we've got some time to have a bit more of a discussion. So I'll just kind of work through this first. Once we get to that point of recognizing our own privilege and then recognizing others who may have had a different experience, we can then move towards making a difference. So let's acknowledge our power to make a difference for the better. This is about recognizing that once you understand that people have different experiences and different privileges in life, you can do something to close that gap. You can do things to help support people and make a difference. This is about championing the fact that some people may need support above and beyond what is currently being offered. And as we've said, that might not be people who are part of your club yet. It may be. That can be really practical things like obvious stuff around financial support, around offering kit recycling opportunities, around transport support, around exposure to coaches for people who are like them, around trying to get more representative people within the club to benefit those who may be in a minority position. Loads of really practical stuff we can think about in terms of offering support in that space. This is about utilizing your own privileges to make better the experience of other people. This is the ability that we can do as a collective. This is not about spending time feeling like you need to defend, explain your own experiences, your own privileges, or feeling guilty or defensive about it. That is not what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to do is get to that point of recognition and then moving towards support and helping other people who may have been less fortunate and underprivileged. Disadvantaged people do not want to listen to white privileged people talking about kind of justifying their own opportunities. What we really want to be doing is moving towards actually offering some practical support. So once we're in that position where we can spend some time doing that stuff, we can move then towards assessing exactly what we're going to do next. So these are the points where we're going to be following up with some other workshops. So assess will be the next point, and then act will be the point after that. So these are our 3 A's. So this is all about taking the time to acknowledge this stuff up front, moving towards assessing situations and what you think you can do to make a difference, and then ultimately getting on and doing it. Let's actually do some stuff. So this is stuff that we've covered previously, but there's some really simple stuff in it that is obvious about what impact having more diversity can have in terms of offering everybody the opportunity to access sport and live a healthy life, bringing communities together around a central place, and having that kind of community feel around a mutual passion, inspiring young people to feel better and do better things, to be able to develop career opportunities, to be exposed as an athlete or as an umpire or official, as a committee member. Loads of really obvious stuff, and potentially then moving towards producing medal winners ultimately, or producing talent in areas where there may not be right now. So I can see a couple of questions have come in. So what I might just thinking about stop sharing screen so we can just have a bit more of an open discussion. So I can see, Hannah, do you want to jump on and just ask that question out loud?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I suppose that from my perspective, it's from an organisation perspective, working with clubs, I can say as white privilege, you know, I can acknowledge this within my own experiences, and I give myself time to think about it. But what is the initial question to ask without it being taken as offence, you know, by club committee members, by, you know, them asking the why? I suppose what's the answer to that why? I know it, but in very simple terms, how do you deliver it in a way that club volunteers understand? And then I suppose, you know, how do you say, you know, initiate that open conversation about white privilege and get them just to start talking about it, really?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it takes somebody to raise the question, to raise the point, to try and start the conversation around some of this stuff. This is where we need to be seeing not necessarily committee members, but people within clubs trying to encourage this kind of conversation around framing it around that point about, okay, how are we going to get more diverse as a club unless we have some really upfront conversations about some of this stuff. I totally get this. There needs to be a balance of kind of people sometimes pointing out that there may be a group of pretty privileged people making decisions in a very protected, privileged environment. At some point, that it just needs to be called out. It's difficult to know sometimes how that stuff is going to go, but by coming at it from this way of really trying to reassure people that this is not about being accusational, this is not about accusing people of being racist, of being sexist, of being homophobic. This is just about encouraging people to recognize that their life experiences, and looking around the table, a lot of those people may have had quite similar experiences, that needs to be addressed. You need to have different experiences around the table, otherwise people are going to miss out. It's just a natural byproduct of having similar opinions around the table, and that is no one's fault. That is just where we're at. This is not something that is specific to sport. We are talking about 600 years of British colonialism, right? We're talking about hundreds of years of slave trade, of women's segregation, of like huge amounts of history, that is very easy to get kind of overwhelmed in a lot of this stuff. But now is the time to just recognize some of that. This is not about people feeling like they need to try and undo 600 years of slavery, right? This is about us trying to just be more inclusive every day in terms of where we're at. So ultimately, I think somebody's got to raise the question. And if people are, it depends how, I guess, it kind of lands in terms of where things go next around that. But I would always come back to the point that this is not about kind of being accusational or inflammatory. It's about coming at this from a space of really trying to be inclusive. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, and it's just looking at that starting point, and yeah, it does answer it. Thank you. But
yeah, and this is where we're at now, in that, like, we need to be having these conversations. I want people listening to this to go away, go back to their clubs and say, right, next board meeting or next committee meeting, can we have a chat about privilege? Can we have a chat about who is sat around this table? Can we have a chat about what we're thinking as a club around how we're getting more diversity in the club? Maybe let's have a bigger conversation about what we think our responsibility is as a club. What are we trying to achieve? We need to be having those kinds of conversations. Chris, I can see you've asked a question. Question is, who are you not seeing? Do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, you'll have heard me say you probably rolled your eyes when not that line again, but it's trying to find a thing, and I'm talking more from a disability perspective here, but it is trying to find that, for me, that accessible way to start the conversation, as you've just said, and by trying to break it down to a really simple level. If I look around the room and I see that there isn't a diverse range of people, well, who are we not seeing, who are we not hearing from? And it's sometimes about noticing the absence of a perspective, which makes it easier to then break that down a little bit, or at least start that process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, brilliant. One of the things, like one of the phrases that really kind of stuck out for me is that, like, if you're not around the table, you're on the menu. In that, if you're not represented around the table, you're being overwhelmed by everyone else. That's, that point about visibility, it really kind of just brings it to life. Chris, I'd be stupid not to pull on your experience with this one. I can see Thomas has just asked the question about how do we get some of this stuff across to people potentially with learning disabilities. As somebody working in the Sport England disability team, I'd be stupid not to see if you've got a response to that.
Yeah, I'll caveat this by saying I'm off duty, but I'm never really off duty. So people like Disability Writers UK, MenCap, others, I think it's about trying to find accessible and inclusive means of communication. So there's some great work around easy reading, people like Special Olympics and numerous others in the organisations I've just mentioned that have done to try and mainstream this conversation. And it's about, again, making the conversation accessible to everyone because it matters to everyone. And if there's some more resources that I can find out today, I'll drop you an email and hopefully that'll help. Is that all right?
Amazing. Yeah, I'll slip you a tenner for work time as well for that. That's brilliant. Thanks.
That's cool.
That's brilliant. And I think, I mean, you can frame these conversations in terms of any characteristic really, but we're talking about privilege predominantly from an experience of white people, because that's kind of the broad spectrum of people who are in decision-making positions. But we can talk about this from, through lots of different lenses. And disability is a really important one. And actually, I think one of the things we talk about quite a lot in the disability inclusion space is that if you purely focused on accessibility, inclusion for disabled people, everybody benefits. There's no downside to that. So Thomas, that's a really good point. I'm really pleased you raised it. Jasper, I can see you've asked about the point about the NGB side of things in the around kind of responsibility to make a difference. I totally agree that this is a massive responsibility for governing bodies and everybody who's involved in any kind of delivery of any service, but predominantly we're talking about sport. And we definitely need to be seeing leadership from the top. We need to be seeing diverse boards. We need to be seeing diverse leadership teams. We need to be seeing diversity in those decision-making spaces. We need to be seeing policy development, more training education, lots more representation in media, and importantly, as you said, those things around kind of governance, leadership, and that kind of space around trying to support and encourage clubs to strive to be better. So I totally agree there should be a downward filter. And we would want to be seeing governing bodies really taking a heavy stance on this stuff. The difficulty I think that we have, and where I would kind of defend the governing bodies a little bit, is that it's really hard for them to influence from the top the experiences that people are having when they're out playing a match on a Saturday, when they're at a training session on a Tuesday, because so much of that revolves around that particular location, those people delivering those sessions, those other people on the pitch with them. I definitely think there's ways that they can influence that in terms of behavioural expectations, in terms of how we as a hockey family can be a part of a bigger brand around where we want to be as a sport and where we want to be as a hockey family, as a community. And yeah, I think there's definitely more that can be done around the kind of accreditation or affiliation processes around all of that, how that kind of stuff works. But yeah, I definitely don't want you to think I was letting NGBs off the hook. That's totally not what I'm doing. I'm actually doing some really detailed work with Hockey Wales at the moment around some of this stuff. So yeah, I'm totally on board with that. I think there should be more in that space. Gurmej, I can see you've got your hand up. Are you waiting to come in?
Yeah, I was waiting patiently to ask a question. It's fine if you've got other people's questions that you want to answer first.
Sorry, I put you on the spot there.
Sorry, it's my first day having two monitors and I couldn't figure out how to move my mouse around. That's why I've been looking up a lot of the time. I'm not ignoring you. Yes, so like occasions where I've sort of said we don't have enough women representation or enough participant representation, because at my club we're a National League team at the top end of a club, but the voices of the people who just want to turn up and have a bit of fun aren't often heard at committee level. And then if we look at the composition of the teams, we've got, I mean, I go to almost every match across the club as a photographer, and we've probably got, I don't know, maybe 10 people who aren't white. And then We have a few people who are lesbians. To my knowledge, no gay guys, but obviously they might not feel comfortable coming out. But when I raised that topic to a few people of trying to, how can we branch out? How can we make it accessible? Some people go, well, hold on, we're doing our best. We're not excluding anyone. But then on the other hand, what we're really doing to try and reach out, and like for my own managing the social media stuff, I will try and use as broad a spectrum of the players as I can. I don't honestly know what hashtags to use. I had used BAME for a while, but then I obviously saw the report, read comments from people in the community, so it wasn't just the government saying it, and then thought, okay, fair enough, and tried to adjust it. But yeah, it's like things like that, just people naturally assume that you're trying to attack them when you raise these topics, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just, appreciate we're really doing it. But yeah, sometimes you don't know the person, and it's how to quickly to be as fast and to make an impact quickly, to jump from the point where they're pissed off of you because you're calling them racist to the bit where they realize, oh no, you're not, you're actually trying to help.
Yeah, I mean, you both raised a really important point about the fact that running a club is hard. I totally appreciate that. I've been in those positions. Everybody is always looking for more volunteers, more time. It's tough. Everybody wants more coaches, more umpires, more all of this. I guess what I'm trying to say is that by doing some of this stuff, we'll help with all of that. You will be finding new people. You'll be bringing new people into this space. And that is what this is all about, is trying to offer more people the opportunity to participate, to volunteer, to coach, to whatever they want to do. This always comes back to the point about, its very simplest perspective, equality, diversity, inclusion is about getting more customers through the door, more people involved. And that is at the very heart of what we're trying to do. So that's the way I would try and come back to the point about, right, we're just at max, we can't do any more. This is about trying to get over that point and trying to make everyone's lives a bit easier by getting some more people involved. The point about this kind of defensiveness is something that we've talked about a lot as a hockey all in kind of as a group ahead of this session, and something I talk about a lot kind of every day, in that it's hard to get that right. It's hard to get it to land well, but this is all about coming in hard around the point that this is not about being accusational, inflammatory. This is just about trying to get people to understand that they would have had better experiences than some other people. And that's nothing to feel bad about. That it's just a fact. And all we're trying to do is get people to recognize that fact so that they can understand that others may have had different experiences. And I understand that by putting things like that can come across really patronizing and kind of belittling, and by sometimes saying this isn't about being accusational, people take it as it being accusational. But at some point, we've kind of collectively got to get over it. And this is where we're at the moment, in this tetchy, nervous space around people understanding this point about privilege and how white people have had it easy for a long time. And it's being confronted head on right now in every sector of business, of life. And it might be tough for a little while, but we need to be brave at taking those conversations on. Otherwise, nothing changes. And even better if it's from a white peer to a white peer. Sometimes that may be easier than a black or brown person trying to come into that space and challenge it. We as a collective can do this together. If you can bring other people into that space to help challenge that, even better. But yeah, I know that it's tough, but this is the opportunity we have now as a collective to drive this movement in this sport, in this space. Yeah, I can see Fidelis has just commented on Simon's BME point. I was going to mention actually that so BME was the collective kind of political term around Black, Asian and minority ethnicities. And there's been a real movement to move away from using kind of umbrella terms And that goes for all kinds of communities, really. The best advice that I give in this space is about just being specific about the audiences and the people that you're talking about. If you're talking about South Asian people, say that. If you're talking about Muslim women, say that. If you're talking about gay men, say it. Like, whatever it is, don't feel the need to use kind of umbrella terms. We could spend a 7-hour workshop on language, and I understand that is totally intimidating. But if you come at it from a place of inclusion, people will forgive blunders, mistakes, errors. If you're coming at it from a place where you want to try and make a difference, people will understand if there are mistakes being made. Learn from it, try not to do it again, move on. But yeah, I get that it's tough around language, but the best thing I can say is either keep things kind of top level about just general messaging around equality, diversity, inclusion, or be specific about the kind of audiences that you're talking about. I'm conscious that's almost been about an hour. Gurmej, do you want to jump back in there and I'll pull the slides back up for the last?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and just reinforce your point really, that there are going to be clubs, there are going to be regions or organisations that might find it difficult to talk about certain issues, but you've got to be able to talk about it and say things out loud. I know now, like I've heard people say that they find it hard to say the word black, and we've got to get past that to be able to have a productive conversation, so we can go through the 3 A's. And I was just going to ask a question, Jamie. Great presentation. What are some good examples of where you've seen this work well, whether it be in sport, industry, society, business, where they are beginning to get it right?
It's probably easier to talk about where it's gone really wrong, because this stuff around privilege is so new as a global concept that's emerged out of definitely more exposure following the Black Lives Matter movement. If we look at the government report that was released a few weeks ago, so the government commissioned a report into institutionalized racism in this country. They were told as a commission that progress needed to be made. Essentially, that meant that a report came out that said racism doesn't exist in this country. That's basically what the government have done. Like, that is not how you go about addressing these challenges. You don't go about by either belittling, by saying that this stuff doesn't exist, by trying to get over this big stuff because it might be awkward or difficult or challenging to talk about. Like, this is stuff that needs to be addressed head on. It's so obvious, particularly within, well, in certain areas, but definitely within this sport, that there are clear differences between white people, more diverse people playing, between those who have more money to those who have less money, to those who live in different areas. Like, that, it's just a fact. This is stuff that we need to work on as a collective to kind of get over. I'm just trying to think about where there's been some really good examples. One thing that's really sticking in my mind at the moment is what happened around the European Super League football stuff recently, and how, as a collective movement, within 2 days, the public got these insanely privileged people to change their minds on stuff which they so clearly thought was a brilliant idea. Like, that is the power that we have to make a difference with this stuff. If we all turn around and said enough is enough, we can get over some of this. And the other thing that we obviously put out a note about was this social media boycott over the bank holiday weekend, in that for me personally, this is me totally speaking as an individual, I thought was the biggest piece of white privileged rubbish that I have seen around trying to tackle racism, whether online or not. What they literally said that this was about taking a stance about enough is enough, and the way that we're going to make the point around that is literally by doing nothing. it's just not going to go away, is it? Like, that is just not how we want to be addressing some of this stuff. What we should have been doing is having conversations about, right, what hate speech policies can we put in place? How can we be linking with the police force around identifying these individuals, finding them, banning them, stopping them from being involved, doing everything we can around educating fans around the importance of creating these inclusive environments and not attacking people, rather than just not posting anything for 4 days when everyone is just going to come back and do the same thing afterwards. So that's why we as Hockey All In put in a statement out to say that it wasn't something that we wanted to support, because we felt like as a group we wanted to see action as opposed to not doing anything. I'm conscious I've waffled a bit, but it was easy, I think, for me to come at it from that perspective in terms of what you're asking.
Yeah.
I hope it makes a point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for this evening's presentation and all the work that you've put in, and all the knowledge that you've shared as well. So really good, and I'm sure a lot of people have benefited tonight and will do so from the recordings as well, which we'll put out. So unless anyone's got any other questions, comments or anything, Jamie, do you want to end it there?
Did you just want to cover these like the last bits about getting involved with stuff?
Yeah, I can do. Just if you want to get involved, you to sign up to the All In mission on our website, which is there, hockeyallin.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter at hockeyallin1. Join our WhatsApp group conversation. You can write to your local region and the EH, encouraging them to sign up as well. Socialise the vision, share the logo across social media, and buy a t-shirt, sticker or face mask.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thanks so much for those of you here giving up your Friday evenings. And I hope, we'll get some more views across YouTube following. But look out for the sessions that are coming up around moving towards the next stages in terms of assessment and then acting. We'll develop lots more in this space. But yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I don't know, I want to finish with like the power is in our hands to genuinely do this stuff. Like, we can make a difference. This is about us collectively doing this stuff, acknowledging difference, celebrating it, and moving towards some action. Brilliant.
Thank you, mate. Good night, everyone.
Cheers.